November the 30th. So next Friday, the 29th, will be his birthday, so we're doing a bonfire drive in his honor, September 30th, for anyone between the ages of 18 and 40. That's insurance reasons, you have to be between that age. Also, the Ararat Ruritan will be having our annual barbecue and cruise in on October the 21st, from 12 to 6. And other Ruritan clubs in the county have got stuff going on. I think Mazda has their pancake days on the 15th and 22nd. The new Stuart Ruritan Club has a mental health walk on October the 7th, from 10 to 1 at the high school football field around the track. And and in November, the Stuart Ruritan Club on November the 10th at 1010 Alley, the Stuart Ruritan Club is doing a bowl-a-thon and to honor the veterans in EMS. So if you're an EMS, veteran, fire, police, retired police, you get to come bowl free. Look at him, he smiled on that one. So, yeah, so you get to bowl free on that, but I think the bowl-a-thon is $25 for 3 games and shoe run on all that. So the Ruritans have got a whole lot of stuff going on in the county, so we're trying to give back the best we can. And again, if you want any popcorn or drink, just go on man in the booth right there, so help yourself. We do have our new ad book out back here promoting this year's barbecue. We also have a few cookbooks left. They're $10. We lowered them down, $10. You know, what you don't sell, Tom will. Send them home with him. So I'm gonna turn it over to Tom to introduce our main speaker here.
Here's Kevin's book. So we're here today because I started this scholarship in honor of my parents, and there's this year's recipient, Macy Hall, who is Patrick Hall's daughter. Margie, her grandmother was my dad's secretary for years and years at Blue Ridge. Some of us are young enough to remember that. But she's this year's recipient, and Patrick, let me tell you, Patrick politics that thing hard. He's been after me for years to make sure she got this thing. So, sorry about the Macy boys. Macy's up at Virginia Tech, and she wrote, I make them write a 1,000-word essay on something historical, and I think Macy wrote the best essay I've ever had. And she wrote about the Nazis. She did a good job. So we got books for sale over here that go to the scholarship, and we've got a little donation jar if you're interested. I have books about my mom and dad. Most of you probably knew, so I don't have to talk about it. I'm just tickled to death to see Jimmy Rohr's children all sitting here right in front of me. I don't think it's about 30 years since I've seen this in a room together, and there's no blood. So I feel like in the interest of equal time, if Danny doesn't mind, if we're going to talk about Jimmy, which we are, we've got to talk about, we need to talk about Reed. Reed and Jimmy, kind of Romeo and Juliet. You know, if you'd married Joey Smith, we'd have had a Romeo and Juliet thing going on.
Is he still available?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think you can still do it. I think you could.
I'll give her my current husband first.
Well, Joey probably take care of that. But me and Taylor sat over here earlier, and we're telling each other, when's the first time you ever have a drink of moonshine? Well, I remember the first time I ever had a drink of moonshine. I was about 14, 15 years old, and it was Christmas. And Reed Smith says to me and all his sons, "Hey, y'all want some eggnog?" And it was mostly nog. And that's the first time I ever remember. If my mother knew that, she would have killed it. I think she would have absolutely killed it. But we all know that Reed dabbled in illicit liquor, so I have a few stories about that. One of them is the famous in the car in the tree story. We were too young to remember this, but Reed for years swore to me that he put a car in the trees at Murray King's house, which was right beside my mama. Yeah. All right, Ray, don't be cutting me off. I ain't finished yet. Joe Weatherman died. Did anybody tell you that Joe died? Ray played on my daddy's 1961 county championship baseball team, and I've been interviewing all these guys. Thank God I did, because Joe passed away, and I got to interview Joe Weatherman before he passed away. And I've interviewed Ray and Larry and Pop. They all played for Daddy. the baseball team. So where was it? Reed Smith in the trees, right. So Reed told us this story, and for years I didn't believe him. I thought he's making this up. There's no way you put a car in the trees in Murder King and live to tell about it. Well, I'm over at the library in Stewart going through the microfilm one day looking at the Enterprise, and sure enough, I come to a front page. There's a car in the trees at Murdy King's house. I printed it out and I took it to him, and I said, Reed, I'll never doubt you again as long as I live. He said that he came around the curve, lost control, hit the bank, and got airborne. The trees weren't as big as they are now. And he landed right smack dab in the middle of one of Murdy King's trees. He lived to tell about it. He said he fell out of the thing, had to go to the hospital. I said, well, how did you get away with that? He said, I called and told him somebody stole my car. My other Reed Smith story, which since there's none of his descendants here, I'll tell. Is Reed and Jimmy had, shall we say, a love-hate relationship, I think would be the best way to put that. Well, one day, Joey, your future husband, and I were working on my Volkswagen. And I pulled in the driveway, Reed's Sadie's, and right as I did, I noticed Reed going out the other driveway in his black Ford pickup. And let's say Reed was going at a high rate of speed. And I got out of the car, and they had this dog. His name was Abraham. He was part St. Bernard and part Satan. He was a monstrous animal. Big, he likes you, he likes you. Me and Ann Gwen, we could get away with anything. He didn't like you. I saw him put Roy Epperson on top of a pickup. And Roy Epperson, not no little cowardly man either. I saw him do that. So I come around the corner of the house, and Abraham goes crazy barking. And I grabbed hold to him, and this is a true story. I looked up, and here comes your daddy, holding the side of his head with his gun out. Reed had popped him, and had jumped in the truck and took off. He had been watching, Jimmy had been in the woods watching Reed. And Reed, this was after Reed's father died, Davis. How many Davis Smiths have I known in my life now? About 6, believe it or not. That's it. He had kept mason jars full of liquor in the trunk of his daddy's car. And every day at lunch, he'd come from the garage, he'd open it, he'd take a big snootful, he'd put it back in there. Jimmy Rohr standing over in the woods watching. Jimmy comes out and confronted Reed, and well, they had a little incident. Reed was a guest of the Commonwealth of Virginia for at least 90 days over this, I think. Well, here comes Jimmy Rohr, holding the side of his head with his gun out, and Abraham is trying to get loose because Abraham wants him some Jimmy. And your daddy looked at me and said, Tom, you hold that dog or I'll kill him. I said to myself, he might miss and kill me. I somehow wrestled that dog into Reed and Sadie's house and saved him and me from Jimmy Rohr. But I know we all got liquor stories. I mean, we all probably got stories like that. But if I'd been there 5 minutes earlier, I'd have seen it. And I don't think Sadie'd ever forgiven me for testifying against Reed on your daddy's behalf. So anyway, that's some of the things I'm doing. Danny's going to talk to you about his book. Before I do that, I'll tell you, 2 o'clock, we're going to be down at the Jeff Stewart birthplace. We've rebuilt a little piece of the Dinky Railroad, or Chip Bondurant has rebuilt a little piece of the Dinky Railroad, and we're going to be down there at 2 o'clock talking about that. Chip says if you come, he'll let you drive a spike in the railroad. So you can come and be a railroad man. The last person I saw do that was Raleigh Puckett up at the Holla History Center. And Raleigh wouldn't let nobody else drive the things in, but he did that. There's a piece of it up there too. And we'll be down there at 2 o'clock. If you're really desperate for history, tomorrow at the Manor History Museum at 2 o'clock, I'm going to be talking about Andy Griffith. And it's the end of Mayberry Days, and so I will be there. That's free. The birthplace is free, so if any of you are interested, you're welcome to come down there and see Mary Hill recording me some more. It's our thing now. So we're doing that. What else am I forgetting? Anything? The barbecue's the 21st. Yes, Mary's on the tourism committee. Tell us, Mary.
Do you want to mention rental homestead in your
Well,
classes?
you can sign up for that.
Well, no, okay.
We're right past
I
that.
didn't know if you wanted to mention.
I'm teaching a Civil War class at Rental Homestead, and Mary's one of my victims. She's one of my 21 students. Lord help her.
Patrick County Civil War.
Yeah, I'm teaching about Patrick County and the Civil War. And we're having a good time with that. Darrell Holland is teaching a class about the Civil War before me, so we're doing a double dip on the Civil War at the Reynolds Homestead. What am I forgetting? We got the barbecue. Tuesday night, we'll be doing rock and roll at the Willis Gap Community Center, if anybody wants to come and hear me not sing.
And the reenactment in
And the
October?
reenactment's October 7th and 8th down at the birthplace. If you want to come, I won't be singing there. But anyway, I think that's it. Is anything else, Kevin? Anything? I think we got it all. So I'm happy today that I've got my ninth grade algebra teacher. Did you have him? Did you have algebra? You can't remember that far back, can you? I understand, honey. I understand. But Danny was my ninth grade algebra teacher, and I published his new book about Moonshine. And I don't remember any algebra, but I remember Danny had this gigantic big Virginia Tech classroom. And he's the reason I probably went to Virginia Tech, because I wanted me one of them. Yeah.
And I had people turned around to sit on the bottom, it cracked me head, keeping awake.
That's probably true. So anyway, we'll let Danny talk, and if any of you got any Moonshine stories, we'll let you tell them too. I expect when we're done. And I appreciate you being here, and if you want to donate to the scholarship, we'll be over here. And Danny, of course, has the real thing sitting over there, so we don't have no free samples. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And so I guess I'll be buying your lunch.
I'll be right back.
Yeah. Thank y'all.
Well, thank y'all for having me over here today, and Tom said I have written a book and he has published it. It's called Corn Squeezins, which is one of the names that Moonshine goes by. It's quite a few different names. And I thought probably the best way to get into this, I've got 9 chapters in it. I want to read just a short excerpt from each chapter. And if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask me, or any stories you want to tell, or comments, or whatever. It's very informative. And we've got something there about Jimmy. The first chapter is called The Beginnings. And I go through a little bit of history about the Scotch-Irish settlers that came over. And they migrated in very large numbers in the early 1700s to our new world. We weren't in the United States at that time. We hadn't fought the Revolutionary War yet. But they had a falling out with the British government, and it was over freedom of religion. Most of them settled up and down the Appalachian Mountains. It was very hard to make a living. And I talked about some of the things they had to go through with their daily livelihoods to survive. And many of them turned to their old ancestral traditions that they practiced in their home countries of making whiskey. And so that's kind of where the tradition in our country started. And a little background, and one of the excerpts that I had concerning that. Okay, everything went pretty well for the Scotch-Irish. Again, it's hard to make a living, but after the Revolutionary War, our country was in need of money to support the government and all the different activities the government was going through. And everything went pretty well for them. And I'll start there. Everything was relatively good for the settlers until 1791. And that's when Alexander Hamilton proposed an excise tax on whiskey to generate income for the new country that had just won independence from Great Britain. The excise tax was adopted, the problems immediately began. The amount of the tax was about equal to the profit which was being made from the whiskey. If paid, the taxes would represent a great hardship to the farmer trying to make a living and support his family. And that started a battle that actually lasted all the way until today between the moonshiners and the government. And the second chapter is called What's in That Powerful Stuff? And I've heard some of you talking about having tasted it, and it is, from what to say, pretty powerful stuff. I'll tell you one more story that's in the book. I'll read that to you. Find where it begins. And making moonshine, you have to make something called mash. And it's made from cornmeal, it's made from water mixed with cornmeal, yeast, and sugar. And it's allowed to ferment. And during the fermentation process, alcohol is formed. Well, it takes us, the mash took much longer to ferment during colder weather. But the innovative moonshiner devised ways to help overcome this problem. The moonshiner had learned from shoveling out his barn stalls that the manure always seemed hot. Of course, this was heat produced by bacterial action that's going on within the manure. The moonshiner made use of his new discovery by packing manure around his mash barrels or mash boxes to provide insulation and generate heat to speed up the fermentation process. By accident, if a little bit of manure happened to slip into the mash, no problem, just a little extra flavor. And I've got some additional stories in there about old-time moonshiners, and probably a lot of them that you knew. They were really concerned with the quality of their product, but greed took over in many cases, and someone put old car batteries in to make it ferment faster, someone poured lye into it. So a lot of shortcuts were taken, which I describe in here. Chapter 3 is called The Equipment and the Process. And excerpt from that. If the moonshiner miscalculated the amount of wood put and the mash got too hot and boiled over, or puked, as the moonshiner called it, the cap arm, and that's the part on this steel over here at the very top, that long pipe coming out on that component on the left, that's the cap arm. And so if the puke in the cap arm could get plugged up, this is a very hazardous condition, and the steel could blow up and cover the moonshiner with scalding mash. I actually know a gentleman, he's passed away now, but he had scars all over his chest and arms and some on his face that happened to him. It still blowed up, and it was covered with that boiling mash. Of course, it was like glue almost, stick to you. Chapter 4 is called the submarine. Now, the submarine is a special kind of steel. It's very easy to make. Have some pictures of it in the book, and probably anyone who's familiar with moonshining and moonshine steel, submarine steel is probably what you may be most used to, I don't know. Submarine steel could be made quite large, much larger than a kettle of pot steel like this one. And sometimes the moonshiner, they make a wooden frame and cover it with a sheet of tin. And sometimes they would make steel so large that one sheet of tin wasn't large enough to cover it. And large submarine steels could have over, and of course that created a seam when they used two sheets. The seams were sealed with lead solder. As with the use of a radiator, which is used to condense it sometimes, lead could easily contaminate the moonshine. Large submarine steels could have over 1,500 linear inches of solder. Whiskey from the large submarine steels, and those especially using radiators to condense the steam, could potentially contain lethal amounts of lead. Darryl, did you ever hear Jimmy talking about any lead poisoning or anything in the steels that he raided?
Not that I recall. Most of the guys he dealt with were, like I said, old school, took pride in their alcohol.
When I was
Once in a
growing,
while, I heard him say, some people was using radiators for condensers,
yeah,
and it caused cause that poison liquor.
Yeah, the radiators put together with lead solder, it would leach out during the process when the steam was flowing through it to condense it. I'll be 76 years old next month, and when I was growing up, I was probably 4 or 5 years old, I heard talk about some poison whiskey that was traced back to Patrick County, and I don't know how they traced it back here, but it actually killed 12 people in Ohio. And they had a suspect that lived over next to Firestone State Park. And he was actually married into my family. And, he never was charged with it, but, he was accused of it. So that's one problem. A lot of the people, again, greed kinda took over and they didn't worry too much about the, finished product. I heard someone talking this morning mention Durham College about the still that they had over there. They used to have a real nice display about moonshine. And they had some 8.5 by 11 placards on the walls, quotes from some of those moonshiners. And it was a Philpott family that lived over in the Henry area of Franklin County. And they were notorious for making poison whiskey. And this gentleman, I'll call his name, he was paid to state publicly, had his name by it at the display. His name was Homer Philpott. And Homer made a comment, I make moonshine to sell, not to drink. I personally, and I don't have anything against anyone who does, I personally don't drink, but if you do drink, buy it at the liquor store. That's my advice. Chapter 5, it's called Moonshine, the Finished Product. And I have a quote in that I would like to read to you. It's about one of the names I mentioned to begin with, it's called Corn Squeezins, but there's many other names that it goes by. One of them is called White Lightning. And all of you probably heard that. George Jones had a song that he made, White Lightning, very famous about. Well, White Lightning has an interesting history. Some of the old timers believed there were two kinds of lightning, red lightning and white lightning. They thought that a fire started by red lightning could be quickly extinguished, while a fire started by white lightning could not be put out by any means. Following a big gulp of high-proof moonshine, they believed that a fire had started in their insides that could never be extinguished, thus white lightning. So that's where that name came from. And again, any of you that have any stories or comments, please give a holler. The next chapter in the book, it's a series of true stories, and that's what chapter 6 is called, True Moonshine Stories. I heard someone already, I believe it was you, relate a story about your cough medicine at one time. And I have a friend, I had a friend, he's deceased now, he was quite old when he told me this story. He claimed he had a cure for the common cold. And I have a friend who claimed moonshine would cure his common cold. He would place his hat on the bedpost and crawl into bed. He would sip moonshine until he saw two hats. Then he would drift off to sleep. And he claimed that when he awoke, his cold would be gone. Chapter 7 is called The Raid. And that was usually quite a bad situation for the moonshiner. I have a number of raids that are talked about in the book, and a lot of photographs. And Darrell, I haven't told you this, Darrell was very kind in loaning me some of Jimmy Rohr's pictures that he had made on some rated stills. And the stills were actually in operation when Jimmy made the picture. I did a project back for a college class in the seventies. That's how I got started into this, really. And I took a picture of a lot of old rated steels. We're going through Daryl's photographs of the steels in operation. I found some of them were still the ones that I had made pictures of after they were rated. So I've got them before and after on some of them. But, the chapter entitled The Raid. This one I'm, very familiar with because, I referred to a Patrick County investigator, that was me. I worked at the sheriff's office, with Darryl for about 18 years. While walking along a Patrick County creek looking for a possible marijuana patch, a Patrick County investigator walked up on an 800-gallon submarine still. The still was being heated by a propane heater to preheat the mash to speed up the fermentation process. The investigator carefully slipped away. Several days later, Patrick County officers and agents of the Virginia ABC destroyed the steel. One person fled on foot, but was soon arrested. Sugar, yeast, and mason jars were seized and later destroyed. And Darryl, you probably remember this, we had that yeast and all that stuff down in the basement of the old Virginian, when we had an office over there, and it got bugs in it. And the bugs infested the entire sheriff's office. Chapter 8, we're getting close to the end. This one is Jimmy Roller the Legend. And Jimmy, had an uncanny, I guess, skill of finding and locating steals. And he used some really, for that day and time, I guess, some techniques that weren't necessarily, practiced by a lot of people at that time. One thing that he did, Jimmy was known to put on a disguise and travel on occasion to far southwest Virginia, where he would be locked up in jail with known moonshiners. He would befriend the moonshiner and eventually be invited to join them at their still once everybody had finished their jail time. And you can guess the outcome of those encounters. He was, used a lot of different tactics and got a lot of stories, a lot of pictures in there. And the last chapter was appropriately called The Conclusion. And, just a little bit about moonshining, just a little wrap up with it. Mountain moonshine, or moonshine may have touched the people along the Appalachian Mountains more than anything. Tales about Grandpa's Steel, the reference to moonshine in country and bluegrass songs, movies, TV programs about moonshine, legendary car chases and NASCAR races on Sunday afternoon, all are rooted in moonshine. And again, that's just a little bit about the first topics that we covered in the book. Anyone got any questions? Anybody got, I know somebody got some stories in there. Darryl, I know you got a story in there. Yes, sir.
I heard that, General Lord had, those three people in Ararat that he knew was making liquor. He especially wanted to catch. And one of them you mentioned, Reed. The other two, I'm actually never involved directly in making it, but he had people making for it, you know. So, you know, he was involved in it, big time. And the third one was, but I don't know if he was successful in catching the other two, but, well, yeah, he didn't catch it. What he did do was, he stopped in the neighborhood, but the liquor method stopped, because they knew that, you know, if we kept at it, that he would catch it. And so, he eliminated that problem, and another thing I want to mention, you know anything about Hope Ridge? You know what Hope Ridge is? When you're going down to Stewart, it's not, it's kind of out the way where you go. The highway department has a place, I can't remember the name of the road, but, that's what, well, a cousin of mine, well, he's actually years ago, but he bought some land there, he bought a little farm down there. And most of the people live down there. It was, you know, it's hilly and everything, and they didn't have much land. And that, you know, and the back acreage is based on how much land you have and how much you farm. And they just had like an acre or something, well, you know, wasn't enough money to, you know, raise a family on. So they all made moonshine. When Jimmy Roy equals some other people too, they pretty much, you know, at different times caught them, eliminated the liquor making. And so all of them basically had to sell their land and, you know, and go somewhere else. Because, you know, they come back and live it. I mean, you know, the moonshine supplemented their income. Yeah, and because they had these little hilly bars, I don't know, but like I said, ball. I remember going down there with them, my nasty ball. And it was like going back in time 100 years. I mean, this is true. I mean, unbelievable. But they didn't have any electricity. And it was an old man, he was, well, I'll say old man, he was about my age, but, yeah, he was a granddaddy, and his granddaughter, had a couple of children, and, they had a spray, they got the water from the spray, and they had a spraying house, and everything, I know, you probably know, and that's where they had the milk and stuff in the spray house, and came up from the spray, I mean, it was unbelievable, I mean, I thought, good gracious, you know, and it was, you know, it was real hilly, and he had a little old mule, and he had some corn thing on that hill, and he was plowing that corn with the mule, and he had a small plow. It's called a hillside plow. But it's basically a little turning plow, and that's what this plowing is. And the way that works, you know, so you always throw the dirt uphill. When you go out, one way you flip it over, come back, and you're throwing the dirt up. Otherwise, it all runs down here. But I just thought I'd mention them and talk about moonshine. Basically, you know, what I'm saying is, the ones he didn't catch, he didn't catch them all, but he drove out of business. You know, he pretty much eliminated moonshine, you know, that's amazing, I mean, that's, you know, how effective he was. If he didn't catch it, he drove out of business.
I got one. You remember, where Dude Smith lives today was, George Gwynn's house. Anybody remember George? Anybody old enough to remember George? George was Fedor Gray's daddy. And Fedor told me this about his own mama, about his own mom. Her name was Pearlie Martin, and she married George Gwynn. George delivered the mail. He started delivering the mail probably on mules at the old Hollow Post Office. Well, since George was a postal employee, he was a federal employee, whenever the revenuers came through or whatever, they would stop at his house and eat lunch. And if you know, George had a big white framed house with a huge big wraparound porch on the front, and it's where Dude lives today, is where that house was. And two big oak trees out in the front yard. Well, all the revenuers would take the liquor and park it behind George and Pearlie's house, and they'd all go out in the front yard and eat lunch under the trees in the shade, and George would tell them stories and keep them occupied. While George is keeping them occupied, anybody have Lola Weatherman as a school teacher? Lola and her mama, Pearlie, would take all the liquor and open up the mason jars and pour it in barrels, fill the mason jars back up with water and put them back in the cartons, and then George would sell the liquor back to the guys who made it. And y'all wonder how Fiddle and Gray own all this land today. Yeah. So that's, Fiddler told that on his own mother, and he just laughed the whole time he did it, because he and Gray and their brother Cicero, or we called him Dick, their job was to make sure them revenuers stayed in the front yard and listened to Daddy tell stories. And if you know Gray, you can just imagine what George was like as a storyteller. And the whole time Lola and Pearlie are emptying the liquor into barrels and filling them back up with water.
You know, Tom brings up a point, and discussed this some also, but back during the Prohibition era, the government banned the possession, the manufacturing, the transportation, the importation, anything to do with alcoholic beverages was banned. One thing they couldn't ban was the demand. People still wanted it. And a lot of these old timers, they knew how to make it. They stepped up to the plate to fill the demand. And the Great Depression was coming along, and a lot of those people thrived. They were some of the very few people that thrived and made a lot of money during that time. Government could not ban the demand for it. Darryl, you still haven't told us any stories.
Listen, I was gonna hit, the three of y'all, was Jimmy ever threatened? Did y'all ever get your house shot up, or anybody threaten Jimmy while he was doing all that?
He was shot at.
Yeah.
Sometimes he was.
You get phone calls from people, but nobody ever showed up.
Well, they knew Pat was there, probably
Yeah.
scared of her, I expect.
Exactly. Well, you're talking about Reed and Daddy having a love-hate relationship, but probably one of his favorite moonshiners was Woodrow Williams. And, him and Daddy were like buddies. I mean, Daddy would arrest him, he'd serve his time, then Woodrow would go right back out making his moonshine again. Daddy'd arrest him, he'd serve his time. Right, I mean, it's just like a little dance they had going on. And it's kind of funny because, talking about Reed's grandson Colt and Daddy's grandson, my son Darren, became best friends in kindergarten.
So that's Romeo and Juliet
Exactly.
there.
And today they are still good friends.
He would be Colt Davis Smith, so I've known 6 Davis Smith.
Yes, he has a Davis Smith, so yeah. So I think that's kind of ironic that Daddy
Yeah.
and Reed had that relationship, and then Darren and Colt have been best friends since.
So Darren and Colt got you off the hook, Pat.
Yeah.
Got you off the hook.
Jimmy had another close, I guess he was a friend over in my neck of the woods, Woolwine. His name was Roy Lackey. And Roy was a big moonshiner, and he had a nice little copper still. And his story I have heard is Jimmy was sneaking onto his property every morning before daylight and hiding, hoping to see Roy coming along going to the still. And Jimmy had memorized every feature, every twig, everything on that property that he was surveilling. And there was at the end of the field, there was a big old brush pile, and it brown, dried up, piece of pine brush on it. Well, he goes in one morning to his hiding place. When it gets daylight, looks down at the end of the field, there's a piece of green brush there. So he goes down, pulls the brush back, it was an underground room with steel in it. And he I remember this, that's probably sometime in the early 80s maybe. Jimmy was on the front page of I guess it was Enterprise or Bull Mountain Bugle, one of the two. Had his arm around Roy, and they was on it. front page with the steel.
Yeah, I think he had, his moonshiners and him had mutual respects for each other, which
Yeah.
sounds kind of odd, but, yeah. But he, like hide behind brush and stuff, and a lot of times out in the woods, he would use a slingshot to keep the dogs away. Like, the dogs would send him out while he was watching the still. Of course, he didn't want to do anything to make a lot of noise, so he would just use a slingshot, shoot the dogs to get them going in another direction.
Go ahead and show them, I know you
Oh,
got
well,
one.
this is, where is his original slingshot? This is not the slingshot that he used. This is one that his,
Is it loaded? Watch
no,
out.
it's not.
She's earned his tea, ain't she?
It ain't no good if it ain't loaded.
Well, if it's loaded, don't worry, I'd miss you because I don't know how to use the thing. But anyway, his brother made this one for him, and it actually has 30 years of distinguished service. When Daddy retired in September of 1990, he had one that's well worn somewhere around there in a box, I'm sure. But his brother Herbert made slingshots, and this was number 511. I don't know how many he made before he died, but he numbered them on the bottom. But, yeah, he would use a slingshot to keep the dogs away.
And he was good at it too.
Oh, he was really good.
Apparently Abraham didn't know about this.
Talking about a slingshot. His cousin Leon Handy owns animal control. And a lot of times where Daddy worked by himself, he wants somebody to go with him, just in case. Well, Leon's all for that, yeah, I'll go. So they're in Woolwine, some guy, Daddy had found his stash down along the creek somewhere, he had a path coming up. And the old man comes down, he's got 2 half-gallons of liquor toting it like this. Walking up the path, Daddy pulls out the old slingshot. Jar of liquor explodes. A little bit later, next jar explodes. That guy's like, what the heck, my liquor's gone bad, it's hot, it's exploding. And he actually shot 4 jars of liquor out of his hand before he realized. Daddy's like, he come out he only had five jars. Well, he only need 1 for court. So he busted 4 jars of liquor while he's actually toting them. When he come out with the last jar, of course, they snatched him. That's him in the slingshot. But the steel you was talking about, well, one of Roy's steels, he had a real nice copper rock furnace set up, and Daddy had watched that steel for probably 3 years, and he never had it fired. Never. You was talking about the picture in the paper, they actually, when they opened up that museum at Roanoke, the History Museum, they wanted a nice copper steel. Of course, they contact the ABC board, y'all got anything about Daddy says, I know where the perfect steel's at. So he goes over to Roy's and says, well, Roy, I'm gonna arrest you for possession of stealing equipment. You never run it, but it's illegal to own it. Roy actually goes and helps him take it apart. Daddy carries him to Stewart, they do the paperwork. A couple of days later, Daddy gets him out of jail, and he goes to Roanoke, and Roy actually puts the steel back together. Put the furnace back, rocks and all, just exactly like he took it apart. Yeah, those old timers, they had to respect him, Woodrow. He caught him making liquor. Come in there and Daddy's, well, Woodrow, you're gonna go to jail. Jimmy, best liquor I've ever made, says, please just let me have 1 jar. 1 jar. Daddy gave him a quarter, he goes over and sits on his stump. Sits there and drinks his liquor, Daddy's got his magic out, chopping a hole. Gets done, Woodrow's so drunk he can't stand up. Daddy told him, he said, Woodrow, I ain't fooling with you today. He said, now in the morning, 9 o'clock, you meet me at the courthouse. Yes, sir, Jim, I'll be there. Daddy pulled up the sheriff's office about 9:45 that morning. There sat Woodrow on, all cleaned up and bathed up, new outfit, and he's ready to go to jail. But that's the kind of people they were back then. They got caught. You're doing your job, I'm doing my job. Cat and mouse, you catch me, hey, you done your job. I get away, I did my job. That was a lot of the back and forth with them people.
Mike Ryan, who's a National Park Service ranger, has written this great book about Rockcastle Gorge, and Rockcastle Gorge at one time was a thriving community, and they made liquor. It wasn't, I don't think it was illegal for them probably at some point to make liquor. This is before prohibition and stuff, and chestnuts were blooming. These people, that's how they made a livelihood. Well, they lost the chestnuts, they lost the liquor, and now there's nobody living in Rockcastle Gorge. And Mike's written a really good book if you wanna read about that. But it's part of the Blue Ridge Parkway, I guess, now. But you can read about the life they had in there in Rock Castle Gorge. And of course, when they lost the liquor, they lost the chestnuts. They had no way, because they used chestnuts like money. They bartered the chestnuts. You feed the hogs would be wild eating chestnuts. You didn't have to worry about them, they'd eat on their own. But the chestnut blight took care of that. Prohibition took care of the rest. And when the Parkway came through, I guess that was the end of Rock Castle Gorge.
It was about 75 families lived in that gorge at one time. It's hard to imagine that today. It's also hard to imagine, I'm currently a park ranger over Fairstone Park, and it used to be an old town that stood where the lake is today. And I mean, you can imagine, it's like 2,500 people there. It was an iron mining town. And Moonshine played a big part in the history of that town as well. There's a lot of it going on. There was actually a warehouse there.
Railroad.
Railroad came up to right where the lake is, or where the beach is in Fairstone. And there was a warehouse that the Dehart family operated a legal distillery in oil wine. They built a warehouse to ship their product out by rail. And the train would carry out whiskey and chestnuts, as you mentioned, the iron ore, lumber. They actually had a post office over there, sacks of mail, a hotel, passengers. This was back in the, around the turn of the century, 1800s to 1900s. And the return trip, the moonshiners would walk out on the track with their rifles or shotguns, stop the train, and make the engineers bring their moonshine back to the town. It's called Fairdale. Bring it back to Fairdale for the locals to use because it was cheap. The legal stuff had taxes paid on it. The illegal stuff, of course, didn't. It was about half the cost. So that was a pretty interesting situation with the train. There was an old lady named Nellie Shelton. She lived at Fairdale. She was interviewed by some of the park staff in 1966. And she made a comment about the train and the moonshiners making the engineers stop. And I remember she pointed her finger and she said, "Now, if those engineers didn't comply, they wouldn't be engineers much longer." She wasn't talking about them getting fired from the job, she was talking about them getting fired at. So there was a lot of stuff going on. It's just got an amazing history. I mean, when I wrote this, it was not to promote it or condone it or anything else. It was just the culture, the stuff that went on. It's just unbelievable.
Ray was talking about deterring. People think of illegal alcohol as just being moonshine. Of course, you can buy liquor at a liquor store legally, but then you can't resell it. It's the same charge. It's just bootlegging. So there was a local guy that used to live not far from here. Would go, and that's back before you could buy alcohol on Sundays. And he would go on Fridays and down there, and he would just buy several pints of old cheap liquor. He'd load his car, his little Falcon, he'd load it plumb full. He'd go out and everybody in the country knew you get liquor on Sunday, you go to this guy's house. Somebody told him one day, says, "You don't quit selling that, says Jimmy Roll's gonna catch you." "Well, he ain't never gonna catch me." He says, "Yeah," he says, "he does things you don't know he's doing." He said, "I come up a hill the other day and I looked up top of one of the big poplars and there he said, Jimmy Roll sitting up there watching your house, waiting on you to come out." That guy sold liquor for several months after that, but his nerves finally got him. They said every day till he come out before he'd go to his car, he'd walk all around his house with his hands behind his back, he'd look all up, wandering all around looking up in the tree. To my knowledge, Daddy never sat in the tree at his house. But that was a deterrent because he knew he would catch him. Somebody just told him that he quit selling liquor. But you're talking about steals in the county. I rode horses, especially all over the mountains, pretty much all my life. And it's amazing how many old steel sites. When you get out in the county, just about every creek, every hollow, you'll find some remnants of an old steel. Whether it be a barrel or a box or old furnace. I'm like, jeez, it had to be booming back sometime, though.
If it was a hall and had water,
Mhm.
that's still.
Danny, did you not bring a little bit to show us how to proof it? You know you pour it in a spoon, you strike a match, you think it's not burning, but then you stick a piece of paper over the top and you think, oh, it is burning. You know what I'm talking about?
Anything about that.
Is that how the old guys proofed it, or
They
did?
had, several.
I mean, I've seen it
Yeah.
done, and they said if it did that, it was like 100 proof
Yeah, when they were
or good stuff.
proofing it, alcohol basically, when they're distilling it, it's, the first stuff that comes out, it's about the first 4 fluid ounces per 100 gallons of still capacity. It's called 4 shots, and it's poisonous, it's very toxic, should be thrown away. And then the remainder of the run, we divide it into about 3 equal parts. The first part is, let's say, from around 130 up to about 170 proof. Real, knock your hat off. They call that the heads. The next third, it's from about 100 proof up to 130, called the hearts. And then the remainder is from the lowest detectable amount of alcohol up to 100 proof. So it's 3 separate groups of alcohol on the run. And they try to blend this all together, mix it, so it's around 100 proof. It's kind of like taking a shower. Go in the shower, you cut the hot water on, it's too hot. Mix a little cold water, that's a high proof. Mix a little low proof with it, cold water, where it's comfortable. And that's the same way they do the proofing. Well, they did this in several ways to get it around 100 proof. They might take a little vial, throw it in the fire. Flamed up, it's still over 100 proof. They mix a little low proof with it, throw it in the fire, flame up. Mix a little more low proof with it. And when they got it to the point that it would not burn, and that it was around 100 proof. And then what you're talking about, they did, it's sort of similar to the flame up test. And another way they call reading the bead. Take a jar of it and shake it, or put some in a little vial or whatever and shake it. It forms bubbles on the top, and they call that beads. And if you look at how the bead floats, and I've seized a lot of moonshine when I worked at the sheriff's office, found several steals, and it's pretty accurate. If the bead, the bubble is about half below the surface, about half above, it's around 100 proof. The higher the proof, the higher the bead floats. So it's several different ways that they would proof it.
Well, how come it could be burning, but you couldn't see it until you put the paper there and then it flamed the paper? I mean,
Alcohol boils with a blue flame that you can't hardly see in daylight. And if you
No
get this,
impurities in it.
Pardon?
When you're burning alcohol,
yeah,
that's the difference. From, there's no impurities, so you get a colorless flame basically.
and like gasoline burning, it's hydrocarbons and makes smoke, and alcohol has no hydrocarbons. And I don't know if you're familiar with this product called Sterno. It's canned heat basically, and you have little stoves that you can attach to it. I catch the can of it with me fishing, and I'll light it with my hands, get cold in the winter, and they're on my hands, and you cannot see the flame in there when you light it. If you're not careful to pick it up, it's like a wax, and if you're not careful to light it. Yeah, they tried, a lot of people drink the heads, the 130 to 170 proof stuff. Those
Pam,
folks
did you
are.
have a question?
I just wanted to say, my grandpa was a brother to Uncle Woodrow Williams, and I think they all partook in some of that. That's all they knew. Really, my grandpa made it for the government, then of course against the government. But I didn't know until probably 10 years ago that the smell in my grandpa's house of apples was his apple whiskey or apple moonshine or whatever it was in his house. I had went to a wine tasting, and it was a Sweet Mountain Apple from Chateau Morset, and they opened that up, and it smelled just like my grandpa's house did. So I figured out then, oh, that's what that sweet smell was in his house. So I guess they made not only corn, but peach, apple, whatever.
Yeah, it was
Apple.
it was brandy.
Yeah.
They used corn or peaches, not corn, apples or peaches, pretty popular instead of corn. It was brandy. The process is the same as far as distilling it. And back in the day, and I can remember some of this going on, some of the people make brandy around Christmas time, they make it rounds to Stewart, to the sheriff's office, and to the Commonwealth Attorney's office, and the judge. and
Not to
Christmas
mention any
presents.
names.
Oh, when was the last time they actually broke a still up in Patrick County?
The last one I did is in 2018, there's
Oh.
been some since then.
Okay.
I mean, it's still going on, it's absolutely, somebody sitting out there in the woods somewhere today making it in Patrick County.
Well, what I've always heard now is that they do it in their houses, and they use natural gas, and the way they catch them is your heat signature on your house will be much more than your neighbor. And it's because you got all that fire in the basement making liquor, is what I've always heard.
That's true, that, and the Supreme Court has banned it now for law enforcement. They use, yeah, they use something called FLIR, it's forward-looking infrared. And I actually flew in a helicopter looking for marijuana in their grow operation. And the houses show up like a white image, and you can actually see human beings inside of their heat signature. They're just outline of it. It's a flying load, but the house shows up just a brilliant white. Something's going on, but their temperature is a lot warmer than the surrounding houses. And you do a search warrant on AEP and get the light bill. The Supreme Court banned that now.
Illegal search.
They actually-
So nobody has to go home and turn down.
Well, I like to say I'm a direct descendant of moonshiners. My great-grandpa Collins used to make stills, for one thing. And then two of his son-in-laws was runners. And, when, this is from a child's point of view, I was probably about 6 or 7 years old, so that would be 1970-ish. And we would walk to Grandma's house. They lived in a little old house, you know, not nothing special. And, like, we walked to Grandma's. And Grandma made us at the door, shh, everybody be quiet, Grandpa's sick. And he'd be laying on the living room couch, you know, in the middle of the day. He was probably 40-some. And he'd be laid out on the couch with his overalls on, you know, snoring away. And every time we went, it seemed like he'd be laying on that couch, sick. And I said, well, he's bound to die soon. He's always sick, you know, from a kid's point of view. And so was my great uncle, his brother-in-law. I mean, I always thought they'd die early because he's always sick laying on the couch. Of course, they'd been up all night, you know, running moonshine. Yeah.
It's really boring living with a teetotaler, I tell you.
Y'all may know right.
Talking about Daddy one time, it was back in 70, I can't remember, it seemed like he had a 72 or 73 Plymouth when the state police first started using Plymouth. Of course, they'd run if they drank. And somebody been hauling liquor and it's coming from Clawville headed towards Mount Airy. And they got a tip that they was coming through with a load of liquor about daylight, like on a Wednesday morning. You know, it wasn't no big undercover deal. So he's like, well, that ain't no big deal, not knowing what time. He gets his old police car out and he goes down to Pinsabee's old store. He backs her up there, and of course, being, you know, wanting to save you tax dollars, he cuts it off. Sat there about 20, 30 minutes, and here sure enough, here comes that guy in that car, and that load of liquor, and it just smashed flat. He cranked on that car for probably 20 minutes. And that old Chrysler just sat there. He finally got out and walked home. From that day forward, he said he would never own a Chrysler product or anything. He said it's probably one of the biggest load of liquors he ever had, and watched it drive right by. Said nothing about it. I said, job had its ups and downs.
Oh, boy. Anybody else? We having fun with this.
Where did the term bootlegger come from?
A lot of them it's sold that carry wore high top boots, and they would carry a flask looking for a sample, and they keep the stuff down in the top of their boots. There's a lot, and they had, you mentioned a bootlegger, they had a name for everything. They had their own language. They had different names for the components, different names for the finished product, the mash, everything.
What if they come home in the morning and they had that sloppy stuff all over their boots? What'd you call it, mash or vomit or?
Mash.
It kind of looks like vomit because I saw it one morning on somebody's boots. Could that be bootlegging too? They knew they'd been bootlegging because they had that on
Yeah,
their
the
boots.
term bootlegging came, I mean, it was eventually used for everything. Some of the ones that made it, the ones that hauled it, and the ones that sold it, it just evolved into being used pretty much for all of it.
The other thing Jimmy did, I'm sure y'all remember this, is, if we had a dance at Patrick County High School, Jimmy Roll would be out there patrolling the parking lot trying to catch you consuming alcohol underage. And we had several classmates who got to know your father real well because they
Well,
were.
I always went to Mount Airy. You knew we was gonna be in school.
But you go to dance and every once in a while you'd see Jimmy out there in the parking lot. Anyway, I want to thank the Ararat Ruritan Club for doing this. They've helped me raise, I don't know how much money for the scholarship. We give 7 away now to mostly females who live in the Dan River District. So we give them $500 to help them through college. And I really appreciate the support they give me. I appreciate Danny coming. I appreciate all y'all coming. I'm really glad Pat came because I ain't seen her in 20 years, I don't think. But I appreciate it, and I think Daddy would be shocked at how irresistible he really was after he was gone. We've raised 17 full scholarships now since he passed away. So I appreciate that, and I thank Danny. And we've got some books for sale over here, and Danny will explain to you. I want to tell you one more story. Ron Hall, who's an expert on the Allen House and the Hillsville Shootout, Ron did a program one time where he was telling people how to make liquor with steel. Ron puts up a PowerPoint slide of a crock pot and how you can make moonshine with a crock pot. Every man in that room pulled a pen out and started drawing. At the end of the program, one of them raised his hand and said, "Ron, would you mind going back about 3 slides to that crock pot picture?" And I swear he went back and they all started drawing again. Anyway, thank y'all all for coming. We'll be down at the birthplace about 2 if you're interested. And please ask Danny all about algebra in the 9th grade.
I've got some books over here.
Good to see you again. You know I got pictures. You in uniform when you were deputy. Your wife came. She was in she was in the Ranger. And you were still a deputy. She had the bear on her shoulder. Y'all talked about the black bears. Did you see the article about me? I had 4 pictures in there about the bear. It came to my house in the Enterprise.
We get the Enterprise, and I haven't even looked at it yet.
It was like 2-3 weeks ago about the bears.
I've got it.
Okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm from Sarah County, and,